Hi, my name is Braden, and I used to believe that if you worked hard enough, if you kept your head down and let results speak louder than politics, people would see you. I was wrong. The moment it shifted wasn't some dramatic explosion or screaming match in a boardroom. It happened in silence. Clean, surgical. The kind of betrayal that doesn't bruise skin but cuts straight through whatever's left of your faith in fairness. That morning, I walked into the conference room thinking I'd finally get to breathe. 8 months of negotiation with the Hoshida Group, a notoriously cautious Japanese logistics conglomerate, was finally done. They were ready to sign a $2 million multi-year deal that could stabilize our department's performance for the next 2 quarters. I'd built it from the ground up. Calls at 1 a.m. to Tokyo, culturally sensitive rewrites of every slide deck, a dozen quiet compromises I didn't even tell my team about. No complaints, no shortcuts. But when I sat down and poured my coffee, I noticed something strange. No one looked at me, not even Barry, our CEO, who usually made a point of praising grit over flash. Instead, he clapped my younger brother Colby on the back and said loudly, "This is your show, kid. Knock it out of the park." I blinked. Colby? He had been in the department for exactly 12 weeks, spent most of that time asking obvious questions and name-dropping our mother like she was a shareholder. I thought he was just adjusting. I even covered for him when he missed a meeting last week. I leaned toward Barry. "Sorry, what did you say?" Barry didn't even flinch. "Colby said you passed the account over to him to close it. I gotta say, Braden, generous move. Not many people your level are that secure." Secure. That word thudded in my head like a punchline. I turned to Colby, sitting 2 chairs away, polishing his cufflinks like he was about to walk onto a late-night talk show. He avoided my eyes. "Is that what you told him?" I asked. He smiled, that irritating casual smile he used to flash when we were kids, and he took something that wasn't his. "Just said you were swamped. I stepped in to help." "Help?" I repeated. The proposal, the one I had rewritten 5 times to meet the client's tone, had run past legal, had negotiated clause by clause, was now saved in our shared drive under Colby_RFP_final.pdf. He hadn't even changed the structure, just slapped his name over mine and moved one graph to a different slide, and no one noticed or cared. Later that afternoon, when I brought it up privately to Barry, he gave me a half shrug. "Look, Braden, I get it, but you're a big picture guy. Colby? He's got charisma. Clients seem to like him. Maybe next time, loop him in earlier and let him handle more. It's a win for the company, right?" I didn't answer, not right away, because I was still processing something more painful than anger, recognition. I'd been here before, not in a boardroom, not with a $2 million deal, but in the pattern. I'd build. Colby would insert himself halfway through. Somehow, when it was time for recognition, he'd already be standing in the spotlight, and I'd be applauding from the shadows, told to be grateful we're family. That night, I didn't go home angry. I didn't throw things or call him out. I just sat in my car outside the office, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror and wondering, how many years had I let this happen? And more importantly, how much longer was I going to keep letting it? The morning after the handoff, I didn't sleep in. I didn't skip work. I showed up early as usual, black coffee in hand, and tried to sit with the version of myself that had let this happen. I kept replaying that moment in the boardroom, the way Colby slid into the credit like he was born for it. No guilt, no hesitation, just a smooth smile and a few well-placed words. That's always been his gift. Not just the ability to lie, but to lie in ways that sound like compliments. In the silence of my office, I reopened the presentation file. My original structure was still there, unchanged, uncredited. Every cultural note I'd fought for, every workaround I built into the delivery timeline. My fingerprints were everywhere, and yet somehow I'd been erased. That kind of erasure doesn't just sting, it questions your sanity. Around noon, I called my mother. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but something in me needed to trace the source of this rot. She answered on the third ring, chipper as ever. "Braden, sweetheart, I was just talking to Colby. He said the meeting went beautifully. Congratulations to both of you." There it was, both of you, like we'd tag-teamed it, like I hadn't been blindsided in my own damn office. "I didn't give him that deal, Mom." A pause, then a smile in her voice. "Well, I'm sure you meant to. You always think of others first, honey. That's why people respect you." "That's not what happened," she sighed, like I was disappointing her, like this was about tone again. "Colby told me you were swamped, that you asked him to take over the client-facing part. Was that not true?" I never said that. I never needed help. There was a quiet moment on the line, not silence exactly, just that faint background hum of someone thinking about which version of the truth serves them better. You're doing well, Braden, she said at last. You've always done well, but your brother, he needs this. He's been struggling. This deal could change things for him. I closed my eyes. So the plan is to let him take what he didn't earn, because it's easier than teaching him how to build something of his own. You're his older brother, she said gently, as if that settled it. Isn't that what older brothers are for? I ended the call without saying goodbye. I stared out the window, watching two interns laugh about something over iced coffees and Slack pings, and their whole future ahead of them, still believing effort equals outcome. I used to believe that too. That night, I poured myself a bourbon and pulled out the backup drive I hadn't touched in over a year. It contained every version of every file I'd written for the Hoshida deal, complete with timestamps, audio notes, even red lines from our translator. I didn't need to defend myself with it. Not yet. But I needed to remember that I wasn't crazy. Colby hadn't helped me. He'd positioned himself like a relay runner waiting at the finish line, hand out, ready to claim a victory he never sweated for. What made it worse wasn't that he did it. It was how naturally the system led him. 2 days later, HR sent out an internal newsletter. Congrats to Colby M., client engagement lead on the successful Hoshida closure, with a picture of him shaking hands with the COO. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. Even the intern stopped by to compliment him. He leaned on my doorframe that afternoon like nothing had happened, arms crossed, half casual. Appreciate you looping me in when things got tight, man, he said. I owe you one. You owe me more than one, I replied, not looking up. He chuckled, tapping his knuckles twice on the wall. We're a team, right? He left before I could say what I wanted to say. Maybe that was the first smart move he made all quarter. What hit hardest wasn't the professional fallout. It was the realization that in my own family, integrity was optional, but silence was expected. I replayed my mom's words again later that night. You've always done well. Your brother needs this. That wasn't concern. That was justification. So I started playing a longer game. I didn't go to HR. I didn't scream on Slack. I didn't send proof to the CEO, yet. Instead, I opened a new folder on my private cloud. Named it Contingency Colby. Inside, I started tracking every proposal I created, every edit he made afterward, every email he forwarded without context. Not to hurt him, not yet, but to make sure that when the story came apart, no one could pretend they didn't see it coming. Sometimes people ask what betrayal feels like. Here's the truth. It doesn't always feel like a knife. Sometimes it feels like watching a room full of people nod along as someone else lives your story in your voice, and worse, realizing they like that version better. There's a moment, after the sting wears off, after the noise dies down, when silence becomes something else entirely. Not surrender, not resignation, but calibration. That's where I was now. Colby had the spotlight. The company newsletter was already prepping a staff spotlight piece with him grinning in front of a whiteboard like he'd invented logistics. Barry had mentioned promoting him to a client-facing role full-time. HR began forwarding new opportunities to the brothers, as if we were a package duo, and I somehow, the shadow co-signer to a deal I didn't even hand off. So I adjusted, not outwardly. I still showed up, ran numbers, nodded in meetings, offered strategic insights when asked. I was the Braden they expected, reliable, non-disruptive, quiet. But inside, something had shifted. I wasn't waiting to be seen anymore. I was watching. I began reconnecting with the clients I'd brought in over the years, subtly, carefully, not to solicit business, just to check in. Hey, Mr. Tran, just following up on last month's implementation schedule. Let me know if you're still seeing lag in the Dallas hub. Or, hey, Rebecca, looping back on that customs delay issue. I flagged the risk back in Q2, wondering if leadership followed through on rerouting. The replies came faster than I expected. People remembered, people responded, and more importantly, they responded to me, not to Colby. 3 weeks after the Hoshida deal closed, I received a handwritten note from the COO of a mid-sized California distributor I'd helped save from a tariff disaster the year prior. It read, "You were the only person who treated us like a partner, not a transaction. If you ever strike out on your own, let us know." That line stayed with me, not just because of the offer buried inside it, but because it reminded me that I'd built something real. While Colby was playing house with reputation, I had earned roots. One Thursday afternoon, I was pulled into a cross-departmental meeting about a new European expansion initiative. Colby was already in the room, laughing with the strategy lead, pitching what he called a fresh perspective on layered deployment. It was a clumsy regurgitation of a white paper I had authored 6 months earlier, word for word, down to the metaphor about bridges and bandwidth. He saw me walk in, faltered for just a second, then said, "Actually, Braden's probably the guy to talk about this. He's got, senior-level insights into the broader infrastructure." Like he was tossing me a bone. I didn't even bother correcting him. I just looked him in the eye, nodded once, and said, "You really should read the full version of the paper. There's more nuance in the sections you skipped." There was a flicker, a hesitation. Then he grinned and leaned back like none of it mattered. But it had landed, and he knew it. That night, I set up a private domain. Just a name, no company yet, no fanfare. Just something to plant in the ground. BradenRensleyConsulting.com. Not because I was quitting, not yet, but because I needed a place where my work couldn't be overwritten. The next week, I met with Michael, a former client-turned-friend who had transitioned to VP of procurement at a growing firm in Seattle. We grabbed coffee, off the clock, no pitch, no sales deck. "How's life at the circus?" he asked. "Still feeding the animals," I said dryly. He smirked. "You know, the industry talks, that Hoshida deal, they're confused. Some people are saying Colby came out of nowhere." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that right? I figured it wasn't your idea to pass the torch, didn't feel like your kind of play." I said nothing. He leaned in. "Let me know when you're ready to stop giving your ideas away for free." 2 days later, Colby barged into my office like he owned the air I breathed. "Hey, just a heads up," he said, flipping his hair back like he was on reality TV. "Barry's thinking of splitting the East Coast accounts. He wants me to take point on the Atlanta and Raleigh divisions." I didn't look up. "Those are mine." "Technically, they're company accounts," he said. "But yeah, I mean, you've had them for years. Barry thinks I can bring fresh energy. You cool with that?" I closed the folder in front of me, stood, and walked over. I was close enough now to see the slight dilation in his pupils, the micro-panic behind the charm. "Don't confuse my silence for weakness, Colby. You're building a house with my bricks. You better pray I don't take them back." For once, he didn't have a quip. After he left, I pulled up my contingency folder and added a new file. Colby Verbal Claims 03.12. Inside, I typed the quote. "Technically, they're company accounts. Not because I needed it, but because when the ground starts to crack, you want your receipts lined up and dated." This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration, of voice, of credibility, of boundaries. Colby thought I was standing still. What he didn't see was that I was building something he couldn't steal, because it wasn't flashy. It was durable. Somewhere along the way, I realized the most powerful thing you can do isn't prove someone wrong. It's give them enough time to do it themselves. Colby had no idea he was walking on cracked ground. That was the thing about people like him. When the spotlight hit, they stood taller, raised their chin, and smiled like they were invincible. But they never looked down, never noticed the fractures beneath the surface they danced across. And I had stopped warning him. The morning he took over the Atlanta and Raleigh accounts, he brought donuts, the kind with custom icing that spelled out Team Colby. He walked around the office passing them out like thank you notes for a favor no one remembered doing. He even stopped by my desk. "Thought you might want chocolate glaze," he said, placing the box next to my monitor. I didn't look up. "You're assuming I still have a sweet tooth." He laughed like we were still on speaking terms. "Come on, Bray, it's a celebration. Big things ahead, you'll see." He left before I could say what was really on my mind, that the only thing he was building was a paper crown, and the rain was coming. By that point, I had 3 clients talking to me off record. One was already expressing dissatisfaction with the new touch points Colby had promised. Another was subtly asking if I'd consider consulting independently if they were to shift contracts. It wasn't a revolution. It was erosion, quiet, steady, inevitable. I didn't push, I didn't pitch, I just listened, took notes, let the gaps speak for themselves. One afternoon, I got a call from a longtime contact at the Denver freight terminal, someone I'd once helped when a misrouted shipment nearly cost them a federal contract. "Braden," she said after a long pause, "did you authorize someone named Colby to override our escalation channel?" I blinked. "Override?" "He claimed you signed off on consolidating the dispatch line, said you were stepping away from hands-on involvement. But that doesn't sound like you." "It's not." Another silence, this one colder. "Didn't think so. I'm sending you the email thread. You should see what your brother's saying under your name. I opened the forwarded chain that evening. Colby had CC'd Barry, reworded my risk report, and claimed I'd advised a leaner dispatch operation for cost efficiency. It was the exact opposite of what I had recommended. And if something went wrong, if the route collapsed under strain, I'd be the fall guy on record. I stared at the email like it was a loaded gun left on my desk, and he'd pulled the trigger with my fingerprints on it. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I drove 2 hours out to the old house, our childhood place, long since rented out, now sitting empty with a for lease sign half hanging off the front gate. I hadn't been there in years. The porch still creaked in the same spot. The mailbox still had a scratch from the time Colby crashed his bike into it and blamed the neighbor's dog. I stood there, keys in hand, staring at the place where we'd grown up, where I'd learned to carry the weight quietly, to pick up his messes before anyone noticed. That was over. I called the property manager and asked about lease terms. "I'm not looking to move in," I said. "I'm looking to buy." The next Monday, I walked into Barry's office with a folder in hand. I laid it flat on the table. "What's this?" he asked. "Paper trail," I replied. "Email manipulation, client misrepresentation, and a clear violation of our internal ethics policy. All tied to Colby, all documented." He frowned. "Braden, what are you trying to do here?" "I'm not trying to do anything. I'm done trying." I leaned forward. "I'm protecting my name. I suggest you do the same with the companies." Barry opened the folder slowly. His eyes scanned the top pages, email screenshots, client notes, timestamps. I stood. "You've got a decision to make. Either you deal with this quietly or it's going to end up in a board meeting with legal present." By Friday, HR scheduled a realignment meeting. Colby's tone in the hallway shifted from cocky to cautious. He kept looking over his shoulder, unsure who had finally pulled the curtain. I didn't go to the meeting. I didn't need to. The damage was already done, the kind that doesn't explode, but seeps in and stains everything. That weekend, I stood in the backyard of the old house, now legally mine, watching the sun cut through the fence slats. It wasn't about nostalgia. It was about starting something where no one could rewrite my past. The house needed work. So did I. But it was mine, and I didn't need a spotlight for that to matter. They didn't fire him. Not officially. The email came on a Thursday morning. A vague, company-wide memo about internal transitions and strategic role shifts that meant absolutely nothing unless you knew what to read between the lines. Colby's name wasn't in it. Mine wasn't either, but anyone paying attention knew what it meant. I got the real story from HR 2 hours earlier. Colby had been relieved of client-facing duties, pending internal review, which was their way of saying, "We'll let him walk out with a clean shirt if he doesn't make noise about it." And I didn't stop it. I didn't gloat. I didn't post cryptic messages online or leak a story to industry blogs. I simply went to my office, logged in, and submitted my resignation. 2 weeks' notice, no explanations, no drama. Just a simple PDF with my name, effective date, and one sentence. It's time to build something of my own. Barry called me into his office within the hour. "Braden," he said, half smiling like we were old college buddies. "Talk to me. This is a big move." "I've thought it through." "Come on. We just cleaned house. You've got seniority, respect, leverage. Hell, most of the team still looks to you when they need a North Star." "I'm tired of being a North Star in a company that rewards shadows," I said. That landed harder than I expected. He sat back. "You're not wrong about Colby. I know. But this, you're not the kind of guy who burns a bridge. I'm not. That's why I'm giving you time." "Time for what?" I stood, buttoned my jacket. "To prepare for who's going to follow me out the door." The next week, I had lunch with 2 of my longest-standing clients, not at a steakhouse, not at a golf course, a quiet bistro in the city, no logo folders or branded pens in sight. "Before we get into anything," I said, "I'm not here to poach. I'm here because I respect what we built together, and I want to keep building, just somewhere else." They didn't even blink. "We were waiting for this, Braden," one of them said. "The only question was when." The other nodded. "You've carried more than your name for a long time, and we know the difference between flash and follow-through." That night, I opened my laptop and filed paperwork to incorporate. Rensley Strategic Partners, LLC. No bells, no fireworks. Just the beginning of something that couldn't be taken away from me again. Colby texted me 3 days later. "Colby, you really leaving?" I didn't respond. "Colby, you're not going to try to fix it first?" Still nothing. "Colby, guess you finally figured out how to quit." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, before deleting the whole thread. It wasn't quitting, it was reclaiming. At my exit interview, the HR rep, Angela, who'd always treated me like I wasn't invisible, asked if I wanted to add anything off the record. I shook my head. I've already said what I needed to say. The rest will speak for itself. And it did. The news didn't break, but it did ripple. 3 weeks after I left, a quiet migration began. Clients started shifting contacts. Freelancers I'd mentored reached out for contracts. One of our biggest logistics partners put in a request to subcontract directly through a trusted third-party consultant. The name on that form was mine. Colby had the shell of my old role, but none of the architecture, the framework, the trust, the language. It had all come through me. And now it moved with me. He hadn't just lost position, he'd lost gravity. 1 month into running Rensley Strategic Partners, I hired my first project manager. 2 months in, I signed my third six-figure retainer. By month 3, I was turning down work. And not once did I post a single thing online about Colby, the company, or what had happened. I didn't have to, because those who mattered already knew. And those who didn't, they never cared in the first place. The last time I saw Colby in person was at a conference. He walked in late, flashed the same too-wide smile, shook hands like he was still center stage, but his badge read, Independent Consultant, no company listed. He approached me during a break. "You always had a backup plan, didn't you?" he asked. "No," I said. "I had a boundary." He opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. "And you crossed it." He stood there for a second too long, then nodded, like he understood something he hadn't wanted to see before. "Guess I'll see you around." "You might," I said, and meant it. But not in the same circle. Sometimes people want revenge to be loud, explosive, final. But the truth? The most satisfying revenge is building something so solid, so undeniable, that the people who tried to erase you have to live with the echo of your name in rooms they no longer belong to. The first fall rain came early that year. I remember standing at the front window of the old house, the one I now owned, floors still uneven, windows still stubborn in their frames, watching the downpour blur the driveway. For a long time, I didn't move, just stood there, coffee in hand, and listened to the roof echo with everything that had never been said between us. Some silences don't feel empty, they feel earned. The business was steady, busier than I expected, but manageable. I kept it lean, intentionally so. No bloated org charts, no unnecessary layers, just a few sharp people, a handful of legacy clients, and one clear rule: we don't do shortcuts. Word got around. There were weeks I didn't have to pitch anything at all. People called because they'd heard what we stood for, not just what we offered, and that meant more to me than any press release or award I'd ever received. But some names still showed up in my inbox when I wasn't expecting them. Like the email from colby.rensley@gmail.com, subject line, "Coffee?" I stared at it for nearly 10 minutes. Then I closed the tab. 2 weeks later, I ran into my mother at the grocery store. We hadn't spoken in months. Not really. There'd been polite texts about holidays and passing articles she thought I'd like, but nothing deeper. And she never once asked what really happened between me and Colby. She didn't have to. She walked over to me near the bakery section, holding a carton of eggs like it was a shield. "You look good," she said. "Healthier, happier." I nodded. "I am." She didn't smile, not fully. Just that half expression people use when they're trying not to admit they were wrong. "Colby's not doing well," she added quietly. "He's trying to find his footing." "Was he looking for it when he stepped on mine?" I asked, and immediately regretted the bitterness in my tone. But she didn't push back, just looked down and adjusted the eggs in her cart, like she needed something to hold on to. "I didn't know everything," she said after a moment. I thought giving him a leg up wouldn't take anything from you." "It didn't," I replied, "but it taught him he never had to climb." She blinked, and for once didn't have a response. "I hope he figures it out," I added, "but I'm not his practice ground anymore." That night I sat on the back steps of the house, rain still clinging to the air, and thought about what I'd built. Not just the business, but the boundary. The version of myself that no longer apologized for existing, for taking up space, for saying no. It was strange how quiet peace could be. Not passive, not detached, but anchored. The final twist didn't come from Colby. It came from Barry. I received a voicemail out of the blue. "Braden, it's Barry. Just wanted to say, you were right. We should have listened sooner. If you're open to a conversation I'd like to explore, well, I'll leave that up to you." I never called back. Some bridges aren't meant to be crossed again. Some are meant to stand behind you, smoldering in the rear view, so you remember exactly why you started walking in the first place. Months passed. Then one day I received a manila envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a worn Polaroid. Two boys on a porch, me, maybe 10, arm around a younger Colby, both grinning like idiots with grass-stained jeans and scraped knees. On the back, in handwriting I hadn't seen in years, was a single sentence. Sorry, I learned too late. There was no name, no note, but I didn't need one. I didn't frame the photo. Didn't put it on my desk or hang it on a wall, but I kept it, tucked in the back of a drawer, not as a wound, not as a victory, just as a weight. A reminder of the quiet cost of pretending love is the same thing as loyalty. Sometimes people ask if I ever forgave him. I tell them this: forgiveness isn't letting someone off the hook. It's letting yourself stop bleeding. And I stopped bleeding a long time ago. The first contract I ever signed under my own name hangs in a frame above the bookshelf. It's not the biggest one I've landed, not the most profitable, but it's the one that mattered most because it wasn't just a deal. It was proof. Proof that I didn't need a title someone else handed me. Didn't need validation from a family that mistook silence for strength and guilt for love. Didn't need to wait my turn to be respected. I only needed the freedom to stop apologizing for outgrowing the rooms I used to shrink myself into. It's funny how success feels different when you build it on your own terms. It's quieter, cleaner. There's no scoreboard to prove yourself on. Just the quiet knowing that this time, no one can swap your name at the top of the page. The house has finally been renovated. New floors, windows that actually shut, an office overlooking the yard. I kept the creaky step on the porch, not out of sentimentality, but because it reminds me that even in stability, there's always something unfinished. And that's okay. I work less now, or maybe I just work smarter. The team I built isn't big, but it's built on trust. No one hides behind credit. Everyone stands in the light they earn. And that kind of environment, you can't fake that. You live it. One afternoon, I hosted a small strategy roundtable at the house. Former clients, colleagues, a few up-and-coming professionals from the industry. No formal agenda, just coffee, whiteboards, and ideas. Someone asked midway through a brainstorming session, "How'd you get your start, Braden?" I paused. Because how do you explain that sometimes the only reason you learn to build something right is because someone else showed you exactly how to build it wrong? I smiled. I took a detour, but it led somewhere better. That's all I said. That's all I needed to say. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood in the yard. The breeze was light, and somewhere down the street a dog barked. Normal, unremarkable, and somehow deeply comforting. There's a peace that doesn't come from revenge, or applause, or validation. It comes from no longer needing any of those things. I still get the occasional email from people who knew me before the business, before the fallout, before the silence. Some of them want to reconnect, some want to pick my brain. A few just want to say they saw what happened and that they're glad I made it out. I respond when I feel like it, not out of arrogance, out of clarity, because I no longer live my life through the lens of obligation. Not to family, not to systems, not to shadows. Only to truth. And the version of myself that fought like hell to arrive here. If you've ever had someone take your name off something you built, if you've ever been told to make room for someone who never earned the space, if you've ever kept quiet while the spotlight landed on the wrong person, let me say this: you are not invisible. You are not overreacting. And you don't owe anyone your silence to keep the peace they broke. I didn't write this to tell you how to get even. I wrote this to remind you that it's possible to get free. Sometimes the most powerful thing we do isn't proving someone wrong. It's choosing a life they no longer get to narrate. What would your story sound like if you stopped asking for permission to tell it? Looking back, I've learned that protecting your peace doesn't mean shutting people out. It means honoring the boundaries that protect who you're becoming. You don't need to stay silent just to keep the comfort of others. If someone rewrites your story, you have every right to take the pen back. So let me ask you, have you ever walked away, not out of pride, but to reclaim your worth? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, or what moment made you realize your voice matters. And if this video spoke to something in you, please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next story. Let's keep growing, healing, and rising together.